Welcome to the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, a podcast where we are seeking to lead change while also seeking to understand. I'm your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBron. We are here to bring another exciting episode here at the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. And as you can see today, we are joined by a special guest, Dr.Vibe. He is the host and producer of the award-winning show, the Dr.Vibe Show, and you will hear more about who he is and what he does momentarily. But before we get into that, we definitely want to just say thank you to our unscripted audience, those of you that have been supporting us, following us on our social media platforms, whether that be on Facebook, the Unscripted Authentic Leadership page, or on our Instagram at Unscripted Leadership. And you can even find us on LinkedIn, Unscripted Authentic Leadership. And those of you that may not watch the podcast back on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, those of you that will stream on our streaming platforms, that you can find us there, Unscripted Authentic Leadership on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeart Radio, Stitcher, and so forth. Any major podcast platform you can find us on, or even visit us at our website at unscriptedleadership.buzzsprout.com. And we always start the show just by making sure that everybody's good, checking in on everybody. John, how are you doing, man?
Fabulous. Wonderful. It's been a great weekend. So excited about having this conversation. So important. So yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, absolutely. I am excited to get into this conversation on fatherhood and the importance of being present. But before we dive into that conversation, we want our guest to introduce himself further and tell the unscripted audience who you are, more about who you are, and more about what you do with the Dr.Vibe Show.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for allowing me to share with you and your audience. I'm truly humbled that John reached out to me and said, "Hey, love to have you on." I say, "Hey, let's make it happen." So yeah. I'm very humbled, and I'm just here to serve, really and truly, here to have to serve and have people win. Really, that's what I get down to. A little bit about me. I'm Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. I am based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, so north of the 49th. I've been hosting the Dr. Vibe Show for over 10 years. I've done over 2,000 online conversations. I'm a two-time Canadian Ethnic Media Association Award winner, 2020. Actually, if you don't believe me, what my mentor always says, show proof.
Yeah.
So I received this.
Love it. That's so cool.
In 2020. And which is the best podcast news award, and also the same organization gave me the Innovation Award in 2018, which is their second highest level of achievement award. And I've done that. I also host the only podcast, or I like to say online show, because podcasts get so overused. I like to say online show. I like to be different at times. Yeah. The only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care and Dad Central. And Dad Central is Canada's national fatherhood organization. I'm also board chair of an organization called the Global Food and Drink Initiative, which is a media nonprofit to highlight Blacks in food, wine, and travel around the world. Funny enough, all the board is based in your country, the United States, but I'm based here in Canada. So that's one of those things. And I'm an empowerment coach, mainly for men, but other people too. I could run my mouth for a million years, but you're not here for me to talk about me. The why I do what I do is I just want people to win. And especially when it comes to men and fathers, that I'm a strong believer that the better that fathers and men are, the better the world will be. That's my why.
Yeah, perfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's great. Everything that you said, kudos to everything that you're doing.
Received.
We're just honored, and keep going forward, Doc.
Yeah.
We definitely want to hear more of your expertise.
I don't know. I think more of mistakes and correcting myself at times, but you know what? But even strong men struggle, brothers. Even strong men struggle.
Yeah. That's good. I think that's a good launch point.
Okay.
Because we want to talk about the presence of fatherhood and the importance of it. I think that we can kind of come to an agreement that fatherhood is important, but there's different aspects to it. Points of, like you just said, about the strong man, about men being able to be vulnerable, even in their family and in their community. But let's lay the foundation about the present piece. And so, Doc, I just want to start the conversation of what does being present as a man and a father mean to you?
Well, it's interesting. A number of years ago, I was doing a presentation. I call it a sharing session because I don't like present. I like to share with people. And a lot of times when I go out and do my sharing sessions about fatherhood, large majority of the audience is women. And I talked about being present in a father's life. And after, a lady came up to me and says, "You know what? I disagree with you." I go, "Oh, sorry. All right." She said, it's more important for presence than present. And I thought about that. And one of the things, another things I do is I'm a facilitator for a course called Super Dad, Super Kids. And it's a parenting course for fathers, for kids. Very rare. You don't see too many of those out there. And one of the key messages we want to give to fathers out there is it's not how much time you spend with your kids, it's what you do with the time you spend with your kids.
Wow.
So when I saw this title about presence, I said I wanted to put that out in the open in the beginning, that there could be many different reasons that a father doesn't have that time with his child or children. But if he makes the quality time when he's spending time with his child or his children, that is not only as important, maybe more important. So we can have fathers that just hang out with their kids, but the kids aren't feeling any good vibes off of it. It's what they're doing. Being present is one thing. What presence is a father providing his child or children? So I hope I didn't mess you up with my response there.
You're good.
But I just wanted to dive a little deeper there. So a lot of things I'm going to share is through evaluated experience and other stories from mentors that I've been given to share with your audience this evening.
You think it's a little bit of the difference between the father who's like emotionally like involved with his children versus around the house? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
When you say presence, that's the first thing that comes to mind is, I have two children. I have Andrew, who is 9. He's actually John the 4th. We call him Andrew or Drewski. And Lily, who's perfect, and 6. And not really, but I mean, she's great. But yeah, the emotional presence of being with your kids, around your kids emotionally, and understanding what they're going through and listening and those types of things versus, we all have friends who are fathers or dads. And they don't seem to understand what stage of life their children are even in. You say, you're like, even some of the simple questions they struggle with. What do they like? Not like, all those types of things. I have a friend who says, he said something to me once. It was I took it as a nice compliment, but I didn't understand why he couldn't be that way. He said, "I respect you a lot." I'm like, "Oh, well, thanks." And he said, because he's like, "You seem to really understand how to like the kid things." What he said, he's like, I just don't understand. I don't get it. And like he's a dad, he's around, but there's a disconnect between his relationship and his kids in the whole, like in the actual engagement with the children, if that makes any sense. And I don't know why he feels that way, but yeah, he's just not.
It makes perfect sense, because there's a lot of dads and fathers that are like that. I'd love to have a conversation with that gentleman, because one of the first questions I'd ask him is, how was the relationship with you and your dad when you were growing up?
Yeah, very similar, actually. If I had to,
right,
knowing him for that long, your dad was, didn't come to a lot of events. Loved them, very hard on him, like very hard. But I never saw him, and thus he was like working on the house kind of thing. You would never see him at things, and you knew they weren't like close. He wasn't going to talk to his dad when he was in trouble.
Well, one of my mentors said a long time ago, a lot of times when we're kids, we emulate what we replicate.
Mm. Mm.
Did I say something wrong, my man? You're just like, what's wrong?
That's good.
But
so
it's
good.
true, right? Because, perfect example. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to host a session called Minding Our Minds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a session for Black fathers and mental health.
Okay.
2 days before the event, guess how many fathers signed up?
Very little, I'm assuming.
Take a guess. Give me a number.
50?
I wish.
Oh.
Maybe five or 10.
I wish again. 3.
Oh.
Okay.
Guess how many showed up that day of the event?
I mean, we're guys. It's always last minute.
What?
That's probably when you get your turnout. Like 30?
Not bad. 40.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Okay.
So I had my flip charts already, and divine intervention said, ask this question to the guys. And I asked them this question. I said, how many of you have or had a good relationship with your father? How many hands went up? Take a guess.
Maybe a third.
A few.
Well, you said how many, which means that's very little.
3.
Oh, my.
So right there, what I wanted to do totally changed.
Yeah.
We just landed on that conversation piece for 3.5 hours. I had to kick him out of the place.
Good for you.
Because I realized that is a core thing in regards to fatherhood.
Mm-hmm.
So every father has a father. The question is, where is that father, or what was that relationship? And a lot of times we don't ask our fathers what that relationship is.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I've noticed is one of the key moments in a father's life is when his father dies, regardless of the relationship he had with that dad. That's a key moment.
Mm-hmm. So you've been talking about the development piece, about the fathers who have had fathers. Mm-hmm. So what do you say to that man that has a family of his own now, and either he didn't have a relationship with his father, for whatever reason, his father was in jail, his father abandoned him, or just as you mentioned, he sought after his father, and after a period of time, maybe his father passed away. So how does that father who doesn't have that model, that example to follow, how does he learn how to be present and how to communicate and how to exemplify, say that he has a son? How does he show his son how to be a father when that was never example or exemplified for him?
Great point. And it's always an ongoing challenge. I think one of the things that, and I guess people are beginning to tag me on this, but I believe that before he became a father, he's a man. Okay. So when I call it work, when I do my passion with fathers, I want to develop the man first, because the better man he is, the better father he's going to be. If he was not raised or did not have a father in his life, we have to identify that. Well, first things first, he's got to ask. Unfortunately, a lot of times pride comes into the way, and as one of the books I read says, pride comes before a fall. Mm-hmm. So if you know that something isn't right, what we have to realize too is, as a father, everything you do is going to impact your kids, whether you know it or not. And many times when I'm helping fathers, when they make mistakes, a lot of times they're only thinking about themselves. When they start thinking about their family, that's when the light comes on. They have to realize that they have impact. If you haven't had a father in your life or not had a father figure, I feel for you. Truly and honestly, I feel for you. But that shouldn't prevent you from wanting to be the best father that you can. There are organizations, there are areas out there. And one of the things I say, that every man, whether he's a father or not, should have 2 or 3 men in his life. They're going to love him during the good times and love him during the bad times, because you're going to have both. And it's always better if you have as I would call your ride or die guys. And these are not just guys who talk about football or baseball. There's more to life than that.
Yeah.
So I fully believe that if you don't have it, ask for it. If you really want to get better, and you can't do it all by yourself anyways. Even if you did have a father, you can't do it all on your own, because remember, everything you're doing is having a good or bad impact on your kids and on your family.
Yeah. John, did you have a question before I move on?
No, I was amen with everything you said. It made me just think about the importance of mentorship and finding those role models and people to look. We have an episode on mentorship. It's one of our more watched episodes, maybe the most one. And if anybody wants to refer back to it, basically talks about the importance of having mentors in your life, people who they look at things from a bigger view. Then when you're in the weeds in something, someone else can look at a higher level and help guide you through things, or maybe someone usually the further along in life and can help you sort of see the next several steps of where you're going and that kind of thing, or take or even sometimes it's nice to have somebody who does not have a emotional, like they're not emotionally involved in what you're trying to go through. Therefore, they can help you make reasonable decisions without having the emotional attachment. That's why it's so important not to make decisions like late at night when you're tired or, when you're mad, stuff like that.
Well,
but anyway.
It's a good point you bring up. I have an acronym about you should not. It's the acronym HALT, HALT. Never make a decision. H, when you're hungry.
Yeah.
A, when you're angry. C, when you're lonely. I mean, T, L is lonely, not C. I was saying C. L, when you're lonely, and T, when you're tired. So that's my HALT acronym about making decisions. Try to avoid making decisions if you're in any of those states. And, I think that it's just so key. And you know what? We're all trying to get it right. So anyone who's watching this, I mess up like all the rest of them. But I realize that I just want to get a little bit better each day. Because as I say, especially to fathers and men, a mistake is a moment. It's not a person.
That's good. I want to talk about what would you say to the men and the fathers? How can we better sharpen our communication skills with our children or with our family? I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm a reader. That's one of the things that I do too. If I'm not an expertise on a particular subject, I'll read about it, because I feel like as just naturally as men, we're problem solvers.
Yeah.
So if our wife comes to us, we're not really trying to communicate and have a long conversation. We're just trying to get to the solution. But when you have a child and have children, like I said, as a 4-year-old, trying to communicate to their level and also modeling that communication between her mother and myself, how can men better communicate or sharpen our communication skills when dealing with our families?
Okay, so there's just an aspect when you're thinking about children, depending on what age, one of the best ways, especially if they're young kids, one of the best ways to improve your communication skills is the aspect of play. Play with your children. You find out how they communicate, what their limits are, what their boundaries are. Play with them. Kids, last I checked, most kids love play. And the quality time you can spend just playing games, playing puzzles, it creates, in most cases, a closer bond with you and the child or children. So again, one of the key aspects is play. As they grow up in age, invest time in them. Ask how their day was. Especially these days, we're in pandemic times. They're going to be around a little bit more, but invest in them. Ask, if depending what age, ask their opinions, see how they're feeling, because especially now they're spending so much time in front of a screen. You want to make sure that you have a notion of what's going on with them. And it doesn't always work, but you have to show the initiative that you are interested in their lives. Because in my opinion, children are an investment. They're not an expense. Some people say, yeah, well, they do cost a lot of money. Yeah, they don't cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to raise them. The children themselves, you want to you want to treat them it's an investment in their lives. Because as I say to many fathers, especially fathers that are over 30 years old, fathers in general, when I first meet them, I will say, look, God willing, you probably are not going to live as long as your children. They agree with me on that. And then I say, well, let's hope and pray that they are living in a house, home, apartment, something after you're gone. I would love to see or love to know that in that place, there's a picture of you in their place. How many fathers would like a picture of them in their child's place? Yep. Right? Then the next key part is, so if someone asks who's in that picture, what do you want that child to say about you?
Yeah. John, you got anything?
You were talking about taking time to have conversation and get to know them through play and so forth. What about other aspects of like family dinners? Things that, because we're so busy too. My family is just as on the go as anybody. I'll put my calendar right next to anybody, but there's nothing more satisfying than there's nothing I love more than being dad. Like there's just not even close. People ask me what's your favorite thing, like being dad. It just is. It's a lot of work, but it's so gratifying, and just seeing them each step of the way, just getting better. Especially my son, he's 9, and this last 6 months, I just get emotional just thinking how much he's changed and grown into starting into that young man. I'm just so proud of him. And, he was the kid in class that I have had a teacher conference with every teacher. So, and I'm seeing him change.
And remember, your son is seeing this.
Yeah.
Right. He's seeing this. Yeah. So you're setting up the foundation that, God willing, when he gets older and he has kids, he's the model he's looking at. You're looking at. He's looking at you as the model.
Mm-hmm. When I say every teacher, it's not because he was good. It was because he was like the loud kid in class. Right. And so if everybody's like, well, you don't understand my kid. No, trust me. I have the smart kid who is like singing in class and stuff. So I get it. But this year he's changed so much. He's just amazing. Anyways, what about, so families on the go, like I don't have time for this. What are some ways that they can communicate, whether it's dinner, in the car, stuff like that, to really.
So here's a good example. You mentioned dinner time. Make a commitment and be intentional that you have dinner together at least once a week, and you put these away.
Yeah.
Have a basket, put it in the basket, turn everything off, and dedicate that family time. Like I think that, again, if we cannot spend time with the ones we love, if we can't dedicate time to spend time with the ones we love, you got to remember what impact it's having on them, not only at that time, but going forward. And the last thing you'd want to say, or if your son doesn't do it when he grows up, well, that's what daddy did.
Yeah. I want to ask the question that's been on my heart, because how do we shift the conversation? Because I know the narrative often when it comes to fathers is that fathers are not present, and not there. But the reality is, I believe that's not the majority. I believe that there are a vast majority of fathers that are present.
Yep.
What do we do about the fathers that are present but don't feel appreciated? What can we do to uplift those men that are out there in their family? They're working, they're providing, they're doing all the things that a good father should do, but they just don't feel appreciated. How can we shift that paradigm?
I think it's up to us as men and fathers that we've got to do things like this.
Okay.
Right? Because it's funny when a family situation is not good and the father leaves. Many times after the father leaves, the father's missed. Right? So I think that we have to have more of these communications like this. And one of the good results of the pandemic, I've noticed more men's groups and fathers groups online. And I think that's a start there, because conversation leads to conversion. Because I've had the blessing of helping many different types of men, from a 17-year-old that's had twins to a 55-year-old gentleman that spent over $200,000 in custody with family lawyers to get custody of his child. And I would be having them at the same table They're relating to each other. They both got kids, both living to be the best for their children. We have to take the initiative. We can't expect society to come helping to us. And let's be fair here. And most ladies when I speak this, they get it, that they realize that there's a lot of services out there to help women and mothers. There isn't as much out there to help men and fathers. So what we have to do is we have to take the initiative. A lot of it all starts with us, really and truly. We have to do things like this, have these conversations, reach out to men out there and just ask them, are you doing okay? Once a week, phone 2 or 3 guys, just ask them how they're doing. And we don't want to hear about work. I don't want to hear about work. I want to hear, how's your heart? And not your workout heart. I want to know what's going on in your emotional heart. That's what I want to know. I want to know why you're doing what you're doing. I don't want to know what you're doing. I want to know what's going on inside of you, because there are too many fathers and men out there that are screaming and nothing's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So in the United States, we have a 60-70% divorce rate, right?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, which means, and I'm assuming Canada's probably similar percentages. You guys are basically the same. You just say about different than we do.
You have 10 times you have 10 times our population, but all the percentages are pretty the same in regards to percentage of population. Yes,
but great country. Lots of very similar, and so with that, by default, there's going to be different households with mothers and fathers, and typically courts lean towards mothers for parenting. Now, sometimes it's 50-50, and that's okay, but that means there's probably 50% of the time dad's not around, or mom, but we're talking about fatherhood. Do you have any advice towards that?
Well, I don't have enough power on my own to change the family court system, but I do think that if we band together, we can certainly make change in regards to that. There's a gentleman who's become a close associate of mine who is a family lawyer. And the first time I met him, he said, all I want is fathers to be treated with fairness and respect.
I'm saying, and I get that. I'm saying what in regards to what dads can do, be more present, because they're only going to see their kids by default now, maximum 50%.
So they've got to make the most of that time they're spending with the child. Mm-hmm. They've got to make it a priority. Now, there are situations where, here's a perfect example. There have been situations where situations with fathers where they have restricted access to their children, and they constantly have 2 hours to visit, and they'll show up 15 minutes late. Children are smart, right? That father don't get it. That child does not feel valued, because they child realize, I have a limited amount of time with daddy, and daddy's always showing up late. A lot of times what happens, the child don't want to see the father anymore. So we have to be intentional when it comes to our children. Intentional.
It's a big
with
word
our children, right? Because they get it.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
No, it's perfect. Intentional. That's my biggest takeaway from that.
Have to be intentional and know your why, and realize that everything you do is going to affect that child in a good or bad way.
Yeah. I heard you mention about men need to have more conversations like this.
Yep.
But I also heard you mention several times that you have mentors. That's one of the things that we really push here on our platform, is the importance of mentorship. How did you go about? Is that something that you sought after a mentor? Is that something that just happened organically for you? How did you connect the mentors in your life? You surrounded yourself with those people that gave you that iron sharpeneth iron relationship. How did you find that?
Well, I got to a point where I said, I can't do it all by myself. And then I'm blessed because I host I host about 4 or 5 online shows. So I get myself in environments with a lot of different people. And if I like what someone's saying, I say, hey, can we have a conversation? And then I like to filter, because my time is precious. And also, if I have someone who I want to have me mentoring myself, I want to make sure their time is precious. And also, if it's someone I want to mentor them, I want to make sure I make myself available and saying, how can I help you? I don't want to be a gimme person. So it was with some of Canada's most powerful people in the business world. Now, it isn't a dad thing, but I'll tell you how this mentorship came about. So there was a lady on there. She's the vice president of sales of one of Canada's biggest communication companies. And she said during the call, hey, if anyone wants some mentorship, I'm open. So I was there like bang, like bang. So I called her. We eventually got together. And last week we had a call for 30 minutes. We exchanged stories of our journey. And within 10 minutes, she goes, you know what? I can tell you have a good heart. If there's anything I can help you with, don't be afraid to ask. She got to the point where she said she was raised by her father, because her and her two sisters, the mother passed away when she was 13. Mm. So again, it relates a little bit to fatherhood. She goes, I realize you're passionate about fatherhood. And she said, you know, my mother passed away from cancer about 4 or 5 years ago. I was driving down in heavy traffic and I felt a lump in my neck. And then she put up her phone and showed a picture of her bald. She's a chemotherapy survivor. So if you're looking for that mentorship, develop the relationship before you get the mentorship. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm very much a relationship foundational guy. And most of the time it works out good. Sometimes it doesn't. Hey, no problem. But that story there where someone I had never met before put their phone in the machine. Look, this is my bald head. I'm a chemotherapy survivor. Mm-hmm. So we have to create, for men and fathers, you always hear a safe space, but we need to create a safe and brave space for our fathers and men. Yeah, people can be safe, but they can just be sitting there. Mm-hmm. Right? They can be sitting there like a bump on a log, whatever. But you want to have a brave space so they feel comfortable enough to share their highs and their lows with you. And hey, people out there, it can take a long time for some guys. Mm-hmm. Hey, just be ready, because a lot of us guys, we got a lot of unpacking to do. And mm-hmm. during our and they always say that when ladies, you mess up with a lady's trust, it can be a bad thing. It can be for guys too. Mm-hmm. So it will take time. Don't be afraid. It may take time for you to get that trust. But once you get that trust, there's the environment for great things to happen.
That's great. That's great. I don't think that we asked you, or at least I didn't ask you, about what really ignited you to even start and have that passion about fatherhood. Like, what was the foundation of all of this?
You know, that's a great question. And I didn't really think about it seriously till about a month ago. Okay. And I've always been passionate about helping men, but it really crystallized about 3 or 4 weeks ago. About 12 years ago, my father had a heart attack. And before I wheeled him in on his gurney into his operating room. And I don't wish this to anybody, but I wheeled him in. And then I was there with my stepmother for 4.5 hours reflecting, because I don't know if I'm going to see him again. And saying, you know, I had those woulda, coulda, shoulda moments. So after 4.5 hours, doctor comes into the operating room. My world froze, because I don't know what he's going to say. And he said, he's going to be okay. I ran up to the doctor and I got down on my knees and I physically hugged his leg for about 1.5 minutes. And then I asked the doctor, can I go and see him? He said, sure. And he said, so when I went in there, my dad said, I can feel my toes now. I go, you damn scamp. But I said that was the moment. I always been doing it, but that really crystallized that moment, because my father and I didn't have the best when I was growing up. But now we're at the point where we're each other's best friends. And whenever we make important decisions, we always just bounce it off each other. But we didn't always have that. But now I'm glad that he's lived long enough and I've lived long enough for us to have that relationship. But I'd always been doing it, but that's when it just really crystallized that moment.
Yeah, I think that's so good, that point that you just made. Sometimes it takes a life event like that for you to really stop and to reflect and to realize that, you know, whatever issue that we've had in our relationship, whatever isms and schisms it was, in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter as much as having that genuine relationship with your father, because the reality is you only get one.
Yeah, you know, it's so true that, you know, and for a lot of guys, there's many moments in our lives, and this is fathers and men. There are at least two moments in our lives that are challenging. There's one moment in our lives when we probably, if we in our late teens, early 20s, we're not a teenager anymore, but we're not a man.
Mm-hmm.
Unstable. We're not solid. And then you have when you get in your late 40s, maybe early 30s, and you thought you were supposed to be at a certain point in life, and you're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
You're unstable. And sometimes we try to reach back and grab back, you know, our past, the stuff we didn't have when we were younger. And a lot of times with fathers and men, there's a kid inside that man that's preventing him to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. John, did you have any other questions?
No, it's been great. I feel like when you say the father who's reaching back because there's a kid still in there, it just makes me think of, and I hope nobody listens to this takes this the wrong way, but some of you may, I guess.
Well, it's your show, so I'm going to get off.
Yeah, I can't be fired. So, but it makes me think of what I call the video game dad. I'm not saying I'm against video games. I don't really play them unless it's with my son, and he's on a limited time frame. But that's for another day. But you know, I watch a lot of times when I see dad on the video games from like 7 p.m. until like 3 a.m. and then they're exhausted the next day. But that's the continuous cycle. And literally, this is the weirdest. I don't know why it happened this way. I was a gamer in my late teens and early 20s. I had my son, and I did not intend it to be this way. I remember coming home from the hospital with him. My wife it was like 2 days home. My wife was sleeping because she's still recovering from surgery. I remember having him in the carrier, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play some Madden. I go to turn on this football game on my PlayStation. I pulled the chair up, I sit down, I looked at it, and I just had this feeling like, you know, when you're doing something, you're like, I'm totally bored of this. And you're like, I don't really do it. I'm like, I just have this feeling like, I just don't feel like it. And that was the last time I turned on my own video game to play it. And never. I was 20. I mean, it was over 10 years ago. I don't even know. 26. But my son's 9, so I guess it'd been 9 years ago. So I played up till my mid 20s. But just for some reason, it just was no longer important. So I don't understand when someone else wants to like let that take over their life, but I get it when you're saying the inner child is reaching back. Yeah. That's what it makes me think of.
Well, you know, an important thing is we have to accept fathers and men where they're at, not where we want them to be. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think importance of acceptance of where they're at. We may not agree with it, mm-hmm. but we have to accept where they are and not where we want them to be.
Yeah, and that's not me chastising dad necessarily who's playing the game. Sort of, I guess I did, but but I'm not like a perfect dad. You know what I mean? I got lots to work on, a whole bunch to figure out, that kind of thing. But I don't know.
Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Dr. Vibe, as we get ready to wrap up, is there anything else that you want to leave our Unscripted audience with?
Yeah, some quick things, because one of the things I love to do is ask my community, because I like to keep community engaged. And I did an Instagram live a few hours ago before we went live here about, I was telling them I was doing this, and they have any input. So just some quick things that some of my community said. One gentleman, Pin the Destroyer, said the importance of being present, that if you are not teaching your kids morals, ethics, and humility, then it's possible that they can grow up not knowing these values. Another person said, a lady said, plus the greatest gift that fathers to be open and show their vulnerability so they can be seen not only as protectors, but also honest to themselves and to their family. The importance of the values came up a lot. And a good father respects the mother.
So key.
Right?
You could have a whole talk on that.
Yeah, this gentleman's, again, Pin the Destroyer. A mom can only do so much, and it's important for the dad to be there.
Absolutely.
So that's a few things from the Dr. Vibe Show community. I guess my final message to fathers out there, and there's so many different ways I could go. Hopefully there'll be a part 2 of this. So I'll be short and sweet. I think that love, faith, and respect. Also, it's not easy being a dad. So reach out for help. These two gentlemen are here. I'm here. I may be in another country, but I help men all around the world. And one of the things I've learned about men is they may look different, but a lot of them have the same challenges. So I think that's really important, especially in these times of the pandemic. Remember to give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. I know it's not easy being a mother, but it's not easy being a father either. And I really want to talk, there's also a quick thing here about the whole area of a father or a man being a provider. It's important to be a provider financially, but it's also being a provider with time, with mentorship, with help, being a provider in those areas that are non-monetary. Because you know what, dads, when you get on your deathbed, you're not going to ask for more money. You ask for more time. And remember, time never lost a fight. So I really want you to think about investing the time. Presence is good. Present and presence we talked about. What are you doing when you're with your child? If you have a lot of time or you have little time, what are you doing? Ask what the child likes to do. You'd be surprised how many fathers come to me and say, well, I don't know what to do with my child. And depending what age they are, I ask, have you ever asked them? No. And a lot of times, because that's the way they were treated. Right? So not everything that we as dads, fathers, caregivers, men was right. So it's our responsibility to change some of the narrative. If you know it isn't right, you don't have to keep on doing it.
Sure.
So, and the last thing, the more you know, the more you need to know.
Absolutely. This has been an incredible conversation, Dr. Vibe. And again, thank you. We want our Unscripted family. We don't want you to just hear Dr. Vibe on this episode, but we want you to go follow him on all his social media platforms. You can follow him there at his website, www.thedrvibeshow.com. That's www.thedrvibeshow.com. You can also follow him on his social media platforms. On Twitter, his Twitter handle is @DrVibeShow. His Instagram handle is the exact same, the Dr. Vibe Show, and the Dr. Vibe Show on LinkedIn. You can also find him on Clubhouse at Dr. Vibe. You can also find his show on any of the following streaming platforms: on YouTube, Stitcher, iHeart Radio, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music, and Spotify. It is the Dr.Vibe Show. And also, he has a Facebook page, the Dr.Vibe Show. And as always, at the end of each episode here at the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, we want to give our listeners and our audience our read of the month. Our read of the month this month is The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. Please go read that.
Yes, can I add one more thing? Just
sure.
To interrupt. I always say at the end of my broadcast, whether I'm on this side or that side, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Absolutely. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim wider, aim higher.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so the read of the month is The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. We are promoting business, family, faith, and finance as well. We want you to be holistic in every area of your life. Again, I can't say it enough to you, Dr. Vibe. And I'm sure John and those that will watch this and listen to this, we thank you. And you said about part 2. I believe we'll take you up on that.
Yes, my pleasure, and my honor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We always say here at the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast that we are here to build bridges and not walls. Bridges connect and walls divide. Until next time, we pray that you be the leader that God has called you to be.